Okay, so this is going to be a bit of a different video and a longer than normal intro because it's kind of sponsored. It involves a bit of computer hardware and it covers one very specific Lightroom preference. So let me quickly build the scenario for you. A question that I get asked quite often is, how can I make Lightroom run faster? Now, as you can imagine, that's a pretty nebulous question with a bunch of different answers tied to different variables. But for me, as someone who stores my photo library in the Adobe Cloud, there's one answer that definitely helps, and that's to locally store a copy of my original files. That way, when I begin working on a photo, Lightroom only has to go to the local drive instead of downloading it from the cloud. And that's where Ugreen comes in. I've been considering investing in a NAS or network attached storage for some time. So, when Ugreen contacted me and offered to send me their NASync DXP4800 GT and 4 terabyte Western Digital drives in exchange for producing this video, I agreed. I don't normally do sponsored videos, and aside from being provided with the hardware, I'm not being compensated for this video. However, because it fits in directly with what I was already considering, and because I firmly do believe that this will benefit my viewers, I consented. So with that out of the way, let me walk you through a quick bit about this NAS and how you can use it with Lightroom to view and edit your photos faster. Let's dive in. All right, so this is the NASync DXP4800 GT that Ugreen sent me. And again, I mentioned that they also sent me 4 terabyte Western Digital drives. Now, in terms of what this offers me, really those first two bullet points has me most excited. The first is that, like I mentioned, I can go ahead and I can expand the drives as I need to. So currently, like I mentioned, I've got that 8 terabyte drive. I've got about, I don't know, a terabyte, maybe a little bit over that left free. Once it's filled, that's it. And so I want to have something that allows me to grow my storage as I need it. And so this unit allows me to expand to up to 144 terabytes, which is absolutely mind boggling. However, if I was doing maybe more like really high end video work, I could see that being a really nice thing. It also has two NVMe SSD slots, so that allows you to have faster performance. But the other thing that I'm really excited about is that it has dual 10 gigabit Ethernet networking ports. So when we moved into this house, one of the first things I begged my wife to let me do was hire a low voltage electrician to run Cat 6A cable throughout my house. And I have a 10 gigabit switch, which the NAS is connected to, and it runs up here to my office, which allows me to basically get blazing fast transfer speeds for the data that I'm working with. Now, in terms of the actual hardware setup, honestly, it couldn't be easier. I'm a tech savvy guy, so I'm not really daunted by that. But if you're not into that kind of stuff, just let me put your worries aside. It was the easiest thing ever. You just pop out one of those sleds, you expand it, you put your drive in it, you snap it back in, and then you slide the sled back into the slot. It's really that easy. Now, I'm not even going to bother walking through the actual kind of software setup process of getting the volume set up because I have a good friend who is also an Adobe colleague. His name is Forrest, and he's got an entire YouTube channel with videos that walk you through exactly how to set up various Ugreen NASs, including the one that I just set up. In fact, I used his video as my guide, and it was just perfect. It's super easy. Now, in terms of the actual setup, it's really only 5 minutes. You go to a URL that detects the NAS, and then you create an account, and you tell it which drives you want to set up and which RAID. In my case, I used RAID 5. And then it took about 9.5 hours to set up. So I started that yesterday. It was done before I went to sleep yesterday. And when I'm done, I basically have a little over 10 terabyte drive. I created this shared folder here, which you can see I call it Bokeh NAS. And the best part is now when I go to my Mac Finder, you'll see first there's the Skynet NAS. That is my NAS that's downstairs. And then this is the shared folder called Bokeh NAS. And for all intents and purposes, this will be the drive that replaces my SSD. And you can see I've got almost 12 terabytes available. Now, let me be very clear here. This NAS and the RAID 5 configuration is not a backup solution. So I have all of my photos and their edits in my Adobe Cloud, like I mentioned. This NAS is primarily for allowing me to store my photos, or if I want to expand to my videos, locally. It is not, say, a backup for what I have in Adobe Cloud. It's just my local storage. If I wanted a backup, I would need another drive, either another Ugreen NAS or another drive. to create a backup. That's a backup. So don't think that this NAS or RAID is a backup. With that said, though, because I'm using a RAID 5 configuration, I have 4 drives. What RAID 5 allows me to do is in the event that one of those 4 drives dies, I can remove it, replace it with another drive, and the NAS, the UGREEN NAS, will take care of healing everything and I'll be made whole again. If 2 drives die, which is extremely unlikely, well, then, yeah, that's a problem. That's why you want a backup, because then you can use the backup to restore. So with that said, I'll just say I'm probably really tempting fate here, but I've never had 2 drives die. To be honest, I can't remember when the last time I've had 1 drive die, which is why it's also very important that you have the correct type of drives in your NAS. The drives, like I mentioned, that Ugreen sent me were specifically built for NAS systems. So make sure, don't skimp out here. Like, if you're going to buy the NAS unit, make sure you also buy good drives. All right. So I think for now, I've covered the NAS and kind of like the setup. The point is that I got to a place here where I now have this Bokeh NAS shared drive available. And here's now where Lightroom comes in. So let's go to Lightroom here. You can see here that I have 21 terabytes of storage, and I'm using 6.1 terabytes. Now, let me just get this out of the way. I work for Adobe and I get my Creative Cloud and all of this storage for free. I don't pay for that. So I understand that to pay for 20 terabytes, much less 10 terabytes, could be very cost prohibitive. However, you do have that option. You can, depending on your plan, you can get 1 terabyte, I believe 3 terabytes, 10 terabytes, and 20 terabytes. So if you want that, contact Adobe customer support and they will work with you to add that to your subscription. So just to get that out of the way. But the whole point here is that there is this one preference under cache right here called store a copy of all originals. This is the whole thing. This is what this entire video is about. You can see that I do have this option enabled and it's currently pointing to Bokeh. So let's go back to Finder over here. You can see there's Bokeh. And I'll walk you through this really quickly. So Bokeh is an 8 terabyte SSD, and I currently have a little over a terabyte free. So will I fill this up? Yeah, eventually I'll fill this up for sure, especially as I start increasing my rate of bird photography. Bird photography is probably the thing that eats the most of my storage. And so you can see this is the most important thing. People think that this option is kind of like a backup option. Like you can back up your originals. No, there's a reason why it doesn't say back up your originals. So with that said, once you set your location, in this case here, I set the root of the drive, not a subfolder. Lightroom will automatically create this Lightroom CC folder. That's part of what it does. This to review is a folder that I create when I get home from a shoot. I dump my card, the contents of the card or cards, to this folder here. And this is where I do my local culling. And so when you go into Lightroom CC, you'll see this is your kind of hashed user ID. And then in here, you'll see there's originals. And then here, this is what Lightroom does. It just creates a flat list based on year. When you go into the year, you'll see that it has year, month, and day, no descriptors. So you can see there, 2026, July 18th. If I go to the corresponding folder here, there's 2026, July 18th, which was yesterday. I went to the Post Falls Dam. This process of storing originals does not carry over any of these album names. And you can see here, there are 22 items. But if I go to the album here, oh, well, there are 16. Well, why is that? Well, I actually went through the culling process and I deleted several photos that were out of focus. And you can see there are 6 of them. And what's 6 plus 16? 22. So watch what happens. This is very important if you're going to go down this route. And this is why it's not a backup solution. I still have these 6 over here, and you can see the totality. There are 22. As soon as I delete these or permanently delete these, those will be deleted from this drive. Watch, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to right click. I'm going to permanently delete these. I acknowledge, and I'm going to click delete. These are going to be gone. And now you can see 16 items. Those 6 deleted items were also deleted here. So again, this is not a backup. I want to stress this. This is more of a performance optimization tool. What do I mean by that? Well, Again, you can see it deleted those files, and I'm fine with that because I knew they were garbage, so they're gone. Why should I store them on my drive? The key is that when I go to any of these photos in this album here, so if I wanna go ahead, say I'm in a grid and I'm like, "Oh, you know what? I wanna edit this photo." Normally, if I didn't have that option enabled to store a copy and the photo was not cached by Lightroom, Lightroom does do some intelligent caching. Well, then Lightroom would have to go to the cloud and download that file so that it can edit it in full resolution. However, because the photos are here locally and Lightroom knows that, instead of going to the cloud, it can just grab the photo from here, which is way faster. Now, any edits that you make will be stored in the cloud, as you can see here, unless you're editing locally, in which case they'll be stored in the local metadata. And that's another reason why you don't see any sidecar files here, and you will not, because the edits are not stored locally. They're only stored in the cloud. So now that you have a better understanding of what this option is and is not, let me walk you through the process here of, at least for me, what I need to do to move this over to my NAS. Because this is still, like I said, on my internal SSD. It's very, very easy. Basically, what I would do is I would open up these two Finder windows. So here's my bokeh one, and then I would go to bokeh NAS. And then what I would do is I would take this Lightroom CC folder and I would copy it. I wouldn't move it, but I would copy it to the NAS. That for me will take some time, just because it's a huge, 6 terabyte folder here. You can see 6.63 terabytes. That's a lot of data to move over the network, even with 10 gigabits per second. However, once that's done, so let's pretend that I move this over here. What I would then do is go to that setting here under cache. I would click on browse and I would just point to bokeh NAS. I wouldn't do anything else. When you do that, Lightroom will say that you need to restart Lightroom. So you would quit out of Lightroom and restart. And here's the great part is that Lightroom's not going to start pulling down your entire library. It's intelligent enough to where it'll go to that folder on the NAS. Obviously, make sure that the copy is complete before you do anything. And it'll do a comparison and say like, oh yeah, everything's already here. So I'm not going to re-download everything. So that's why it's really intelligent and why I love it. I've done this actually numerous times where I started with a smaller drive, which is now sitting in a drawer. I got a larger drive and then I copied it over and I changed it in Lightroom and it knew what was going on. But I'm getting kind of tired, one, of having drives in a drawer, and two, an 8 terabyte SSD right now. I in order for me to buy one, I'd probably have to carve out a kidney and sell it on the black market just because prices have gotten insane. And so again, being able to kind of have a NAS that allows me to scale my storage as I need it without having to constantly buy new drives. It's a really nice thing. Now you might be wondering, well, what happens if you're traveling with your computer and you don't have your NAS or your local drive? Well, that's fine. I mean, I travel all the time, man. I don't lug around my giant NAS or my SSD even. Lightroom, that's the benefit of having all of your photos in a cloud environment, is that I have access to all 178,000 photos no matter where I am. It's just that if I'm traveling and I don't have that NAS or that SSD connected, and I want to edit a photo in full resolution, well, in that case, their Lightroom would have to download that from the cloud. So in that case, I would need an internet connection unless I had a copy of the Smart Preview locally, which you could do. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but there's this other option here to store a copy of Smart Previews locally. The thing is, it has to be stored on the internal drive. And as you can imagine, if you have a huge library, even though Smart Previews are a fraction of the size of originals, it can take up a lot of space very quickly. Still, if you don't have a large library, this is totally a valid option to have as well. Because in that case there, if you're traveling and you don't have internet, as long as you have your Smart Preview, you can still edit the photo. You just can't, export at full res until you connect to the internet, at which case Lightroom would download the original file. All right, so that is why I decided to do this video. First, I do want to thank UGREEN for sending me their NAS. I'll leave a link to the specific unit that they sent me in the description below. But for me, I was getting kind of worried. Like, I'll fill that terabyte on that SSD pretty quickly. Now, that bought me several extra terabytes. And if I ever need to, I can just add larger drives into that RAID array and not have to worry about it. Of course, I do also want to get a backup system so that just to make sure that At the very least, those local files are backed up. With that said, I'm not sweating it because my photos are already backed up in my Adobe Cloud library. So that's good. With that said, this is only just that one option is just a tiny little part of Lightroom. If you want to learn everything there is to know about Lightroom desktop, mobile, and web, please check out my course called Lightroom Everywhere. That link is also in the description below. Also, I have this video that walks through my mobile workflow when you don't have a computer or a laptop with you, or you can see what YouTube thinks you might like. As always, a thumbs up is greatly appreciated, as is clicking on the subscribe button and the bell icon to get notified of all future videos. Thanks a lot, everyone.